Gregg Jarrett, author of the #1 book 3 weeks and running now on the New York Times bestseller list, The Russian Hoax, The Illicit Scheme to Clear Hillary Clinton and Frame Donald Trump. Also, Bruce Marks is with us. He is a U.S. attorney, has 20 years experience. By the way, with an office in Moscow, he has been the lead counsel in significant litigation against Russian oligarchs, including one guy by the name of Oleg Deripaska and others who are now literally on the sanctions list, and his name has come up quite a bit. And thank you both for being with us. Let's first ask you, Greg, let's go over. Look, this, as far as Michael Cohen and his issues, basically that case is over as it relates to the president, isn't it?
Well, it should be, although, I was amused to hear Lanny Davis today say this on our air, quote, "Because Cohen pled guilty to a crime, then Trump is guilty of the same crime." And that is a stunningly obtuse statement from a lawyer who went to Yale Law School and, by the way, whose classmate was Hillary Clinton. Mr. Davis seems to have forgotten that little thing called innocent until proven guilty, and that thing called a trial, in which the trier of fact, the jury, actually decides guilt or innocence. There must be evidence, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So, what Lanny Davis said today was incredibly untrue and deceptive and misleading to viewers who are watching.
Well, I agree. What's your take from an attorney's point of view, Bruce? You had 20 years experience with, and you have an office in Moscow, and you know some of these Russian oligarchs like Oleg Deripaska and some of the others that we have talked about that are now on the sanctions list. I don't see anything in any of these issues that have anything in any way related to Russia. Now, I do believe Putin is a hostile actor and a bad guy, and this is a hostile regime. And I believe, they've tried to influence elections, not only ours over many elections, but over the world as well. And they've tried to influence elections all over the place. And I think they're trying it again now. What do you suspect?
Well, listen, let me say one thing first. I did file racketeering claims against Oleg Deripaska and also Victor Vekselberg, who's also now on the sanctions list. The Trump administration has been stronger against the Russians than any other administration. They have finally sanctioned serious oligarchs who are close to the Kremlin. If you compare that to, President Obama's administration, after Crimea was invaded, he really did absolutely nothing. So I think it's an important point for people to understand that the Trump administration has taken sanctions against Russia very seriously.
Yeah, well, I think that, it was irresponsible, especially in light of a Washington Times piece by Devin Nunes warning us about Russia interfering in the 2016 elections. He wrote that in 2014, and Obama in October 2016 is telling Donald Trump to stop whining, and no serious person could ever think that any country could ever impact our elections in any way. Looks like Obama was fully confident at that moment that Hillary was going to be the next president.
Well, let me tell you one thing his administration didn't do, and I think Gregg will know this name. In 2015, I came to the FBI, to give them evidence that Victor Pinchuk, who was the largest foreign donor to the Clinton Foundation and the son-in-law of Ukraine's former corrupt president, was violating international law in trading with Iran. And they did absolutely nothing to investigate that, which was a tie both to Ukrainian illegality and to the Clinton campaigns.
Well, what's your reaction to this, Greg? I mean, look, there's nothing in anything involving Manafort or Cohen or even there's no connection to Trump and Russia collusion in any way, shape, manner, or form. There are two questions that arise from this. How does it evolve into, and why did Rod Rosenstein give such a wide berth that they can literally now begin tax charges and bank fraud charges and campaign finance regulations and get so afar from what the original mandate we were told was supposed to be about? And, now I'm listening to guys like Bruce, and he's telling me that there's a much bigger problem that we ought to be focused on, and we're not.
Well, Rosenstein has a lot to answer for. I spoke with a DOJ former official today who said that his practice was almost entirely doing federal election law at the DOJ. He said these payments by Trump are not criminal. They're not a violation of the law. And he said, but Rosenstein would have had to have signed off on this. And he said it's inexplicable that he would allow his Department of Justice to approve criminal charges for a non-crime. You know, Trump can spend an unlimited amount of money of his own on a campaign. There's no limit. And let's say, for example, that Cohen made a payment for him, but with the intent of being reimbursed, and we know he was reimbursed. That's a loan. At worst, it's a civil violation. And as I pointed out with you last night on your television program, if these payments serve a dual purpose, a secondary purpose, that's not a campaign expense. Trump had other reasons for making the payments, personal and commercial. And don't just take my word for it. The former Federal Elections Commission Chairman Bradley Smith wrote an op-ed pointing out the same thing, that these kinds of payments are a personal expense. They're not a campaign expense.
What is your take from a legal standpoint as you watch, these two cases unfold here, Bruce Marks? From my perspective, it's a big nothing for Robert Mueller, and nobody really paid attention that he lost 10 and only got 8 convictions, and which also tells you that he just overcharges. They just over and over and overcharge, and I think they always feel, well, we don't get you here, we'll get you there. We get you here, we'll get you there, and it just doesn't seem at that point about justice to me.
No, I don't think it's about justice at all. I mean, I'm a little concerned maybe to be on the program here and there because I do business in Russia, and maybe Mr. Mueller will come knocking at my door. But, I mean, let's just remember.
Oh, trust me, he's going to be knocking on Gregg and my door before yours. Trust me. It is the whole thing to me is sad. Whether you're Michael Cohen, Paul Manafort, George Papadopoulos, Lieutenant General Flynn, just by the fact that you're in Trump's orbit and this whole witch hunt about Russia comes up, then every aspect of your life selectively gets chosen out. And I believe in every case it was for the purpose of putting the screws to people so they sing or compose to prosecute or impeach Trump. We'll take a break. We'll come back. All right, as we continue, Gregg, Jarrett, #1 book in the country, 3 weeks and running now, The Russian Hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton, framed Donald Trump. Bruce Marks, U.S. attorney with 20 years experience, and by the way, has an office in Moscow. He's been the lead counsel in significant litigation against these Russian oligarchs. I assume they're going to probably want to talk to you just because you went to Russia. Everyone's looking for Russians all over the place. But, Gregg, the whole premise of your book, if we're going to get down to this, there are a whole lot of crimes that we know were committed and that there was at the top levels of the FBI, at the top levels of the Department of Justice, and that an investigation was rigged to help one presidential candidate stay in the race and defeat the hated presidential candidate. And then we know there's a Russia connection, bought and paid for, Russian lies with funneled money from a law firm to an op research group to a foreign national by the name of Christopher Steele. And that such Russian lies not only were propagated to the American people to influence their election decision, but also then used as the basis for 4 specific FISA warrant applications, yet never verified or corroborated, most of it debunked, and nobody involved in any of these shenanigans has been indicted yet.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the people who signed off on the dossier. That's a fraud on the court. They were using a phony document that they hadn't corroborated. The law requires that they corroborate it. They may not use an unverified document. So among the crimes that people like Comey, McCabe, Sally Yates, Rod Rosenstein may have committed, not to mention Peter Strzok, abuse of power, perjury for signing a false document, a false and misleading statement, obstruction of justice, major fraud against the U.S., and conspiracy to defraud the U.S. Yet none of these people are the subject of a grand jury investigation in which that kind of evidence is presented. Instead, it appears that Robert Mueller and his team of partisans are going after Donald Trump for things that are not criminal.
I read one thing about you, Bruce, with your last question here. You provided information to Bruce Orr in 1999 that Bill Browder was involved in vast international money laundering schemes, and it later became the subject of a federal RICO case, but no, investigation?
Absolutely. It was 1999, and afterwards, Bruce Orr was the head of the the RICO division of the Justice Department. And this guy, Bill Browder, who's, made a vendetta against Russia, as part of his persona, was involved in a massive money laundering scheme. We ended up filing a RICO suit in the United States, and the government did nothing. And, I do business in Russia. I sort of believe in some of these theories.
Well, they did nothing to
have Bruce Orr and Lanny Davis involved. And Lanny Davis is as close to the Clintons as you can get.
Well, we knew Robert Mueller was the FBI director when Putin's thugs were in the United States involved because we had a spy inside of the Putin-led effort to get uranium out of America, which he succeeded, but they were involved in bribery and kickbacks and money laundering and other racketeering. And guess what? Nobody arrested them, and Putin ended up getting control of 20% of our uranium. And the Clintons got a nice, big, fat kickback to their foundation with a lot of people involved in that deal. All right, thank you.